Hey booktubers, quick little show and tell of a volume I picked up the other day. It is actually a short story by David Foster Wallace in a cool edition by McNally Books. Hope I'm saying that right. Sarah McNally is the editor, I believe. But the story is actually featured as a part of The Pale King, which was David Foster Wallace's posthumous novel, which I thought was amazing. It was actually one of the 3 finalists for the Pulitzer in 2011, I believe. It was the year that they did not award a Pulitzer. Now, they never really revealed why they chose not to award a Pulitzer that year, but it was between David Foster Wallace. I believe Karen Russell's one of her novels, Swamplandia, possibly. I might be terribly wrong about that. And then I do know the other was Dennis Johnson's Train Dreams. And it was really, I think, kind of a travesty that, maybe that's too strong a word, travesty, but I hate that they didn't award it that year because you had 3 really cool books, regardless who won. One, you had David Foster Wallace's Pale King, which was a posthumous, unfinished novel. However, I remember reading where one of the Pulitzer members, who was one of the readers, after reading all these books for the Pulitzer, he read the first paragraph, opening paragraph of The Pale King, and called one of the other readers and said, "I have not read anything, a complete novel that's as good as the first paragraph of Pale King." And it is certainly a memorable opening, a beautiful opening. Some contend overly verbose and not felicitous opening. But regardless, that's what this particular reader thought. And you had that. Then you had Train Dreams, which I believe was published either serially or in a magazine, Paris Review or something of that nature. And then later in a book form. So the format wasn't initially a novel. And it's really a novella, right? So you had a novella, a posthumous, unfinished novel, and then I believe, if I'm right about Karen Russell, you won't see any kind of blurbs about my mistakes because I'm not doing that. I'm just being wrong. But if I'm correct about the Pulitzer, the other person was 24 years old. I believe it was Karen Russell. It was a woman author, female author that was super young to be nominated for a Pulitzer. So regardless of who would have won that, which book, it would have been a really interesting win. And the fact that they did not reward something that would have been unique, it kind of stinks, you know. And but regardless, that's a long little tributary there, just to say Pale King was one of those novels. It was unfinished when David Foster Wallace took his own life. And so much of it, when you read about what he was going to do with it, you know, it's about the IRS, all right? It's about these workers in different characters within the IRS, and what we think of as the most bureaucratic of all bureaucratic jobs, the most boring, possibly the most, I should say, tedious. And there was this whole idea that David Foster Wallace had of how the book would ultimately what it would kind of look like from different notes that he had. And it was just fascinating. But it really is what was there when he died. It was still amazing to read. And a lot of it, if you want to look at Infinite Jest as this novel about entertainment, his first novel was massive. I mean, Infinite Jest is its own kind of word for a massive book that delves into all the different intricacies of the modern world, but it was about, in a lot of ways, how entertainment affects us, right? And The Pale King was, how do you write, David Foster Wallace was trying to say, how do you write a book about boredom and make it entertaining, right? So it was kind of that reverse of an Infinite Jest. You have an entertainment, this video that is so entertaining that people become comatose or people die, right? And you have that, they just become inert and completely drooling, and because of this entertainment. Whereas you could look at it as The Pale King, there's something so tedious and so boring, seemingly, that people get into this euphoric state. There's a character in there that actually, right, floats, levitates. And there are some amazing pieces of writing within The Pale King. And at least two of them are their own, are standalone. One was published, I believe, in the New Yorker, possibly a couple more, but they could be and are really their own standalone, even though they connect with the larger scope of the novel. But the one that I picked up today, which I thought was great that they did this, but because there are people who just are not going to read The Pale King, or they have their own preconceived notion of who David Foster Wallace was as a writer. I had my own. I never read anything until after he died because of my own undergraduate preconceived notions of a postmodern writer that I thought David Foster Wallace was, and I lumped him in with other different writers of that era, and this kind of tongue-in-cheek, super bright, but yet pretending to not be, and like all these different things that I had in my mind about what David Foster Wallace was, and it was a really terrible way of viewing it, because I was completely wrong about that. I think I was right about the other writers that I lumped him in with, but he is such a separate, unique voice, regardless of what kind of perception he has now with different groups of people, different types of readers. When it just comes to, hey, read this book, it's incredible what he's able to do with language and the genuine. I mean, the word authenticity gets thrown around a lot when you're talking about David Foster Wallace and certain writers, but it's just pretty much the truth of what he was going for. You know, he famously said that literature makes us feel less alone, right? One of the main purposes of literature is to feel less alone, and that's truly, there's some amazing connections a person can have when reading great literature, and I feel like there are tons of parts of David Foster Wallace's writing that is great and that is transcendent, and you don't want to be just the middle-class white guy talking about how wonderful David Foster Wallace is, but that's just, I'm in this body, and he is an amazing writer. So I don't think we should we should praise those who deserve it when it comes to the art, and his was pretty amazing. So he has a short story, Forever Overhead, good old Neon. Those are two. One, if you want to start off, read Forever Overhead, about a boy at a pool going up on the high dive, and then that's a short one, and then switch and go over to Good Old Neon, which is a longer one. And I think both of those on the ends of the spectrum, you get an idea of David Foster Wallace. Okay, this is his style of writing, this is his type of writing. It doesn't encompass everything, but I think that'll get you a good starting point for, okay, do I want to continue reading him? Or, this just isn't for me. However, that being said, let me get back to the book that I began speaking of. it's this lovely edition. Again, it's a short story. Well, I mean, really, it's a novella, but it's a shorter piece by him. And I forgot what this is their title. This isn't David Foster Wallace's title. This is the editor's. But it's something to do with paying attention, and it is kind of a. I haven't actually. I remember reading it in the Pale King, but I've yet to read this edition. I'm in the process of reading it now. And this guy is just describing his wayward ways initially as a young man, and how he got involved in the IRS and accounting, and it's beautifully humorous, and as somebody calls on the back here, the most unusual conversion experience. And I think that's some of the coolest stuff about David Foster Wallace's writing is, and a lot of literature I really like I was just reading Virginia Woolf Smith's Dalloway, and taking something seemingly small or insignificant and expanding that to contain the universe, right? I mean, that's so fascinating to me, to continue to delve into that granular aspect, and then all of a sudden you're standing on top of the world, right? You're standing in the middle of the galaxy. I think Emily Dickinson is a great artist of that, of the cosmos. Really, you're like in the what is it? Safe in their alabaster chambers lie the meek members of the resurrection. That poem goes through eons and worlds scooping their arcs, and above diadems drop, right? You have all this language of the galaxies and the clouds floating by, and then it zooms back immediately at the end to where those meek members of the resurrection, where they lie silent as dots on a disk of snow. And just within that, right, within that verse, you are now back, not only back down on the ground, you are a dot on a disk of snow, right? And that to me is so beautiful, that expansion and contraction of the universal, and then all of a sudden we're here looking at a dot on a tiny disk of snow. So anyway, that being said, I think it does all wrap back around to the themes contained in this short story. This actually is a neat little cover of the book, this edition. And so you have this empty chair, and then you actually have the story itself, this minimalist kind of paperback with a quote from the book on the back, and a wonderful preface by Sarah McNally about Pale King, and then about this piece, and putting it together, and her experience with Wallace. So it's a very cool edition. That it's great. It's great that people, I mean, of course, it takes somebody with the infamy of, or the renown of David Foster Wallace, to have these editions printed of what is a full book that just contains one short story. However, I wish people would do more of that, and I do think people would buy them and read them. I'm biased because I have a prose collection that is small, slim. Most of my writing falls into that novelette, that no man's land of length, and that's just where my writing tends to fall in, unless I don't want to pad something right now, and I don't want to take it away so it can become a short story. That's where I tend to fall, and there's just not necessarily a publishing market for it unless you are a big name. And then what happens? People buy them up. People like this stuff. Oh my gosh, have you read that really slim story by whoever it is? Right? You have Borges, you have these people, Kafka, obviously. These are all great writers that I would never compare myself to. I'm just saying that I think if publishers were to take chances on these length of stories, they could have some success in that, because every time you put out a smaller, slimmer collection or piece by a writer, they sell and do well. And I think if we kind of psychologically change that mode of thought, that a book doesn't have to be 50,000 plus words or 100,000 words even, that we can consume and appreciate and absorb literature in different kinds of forms. I think that would be a service for everyone, and people out there who are great writers who have pieces that are that in between, but they are not selling them or publishing them because they have to get their novel first, right? Or they have to, they have to find a way into the market. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I did want to say that I do find these books very cool. This McNally edition of David Foster Wallace's short story, Something to Do with Paying Attention. And I hope you guys are reading good stuff, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.